Hail, fellows, and welcome to Pen Night Radio, where we slay our personal demons and arm ourselves to write our best content. I am your host, PK, unofficially knighted by a fictional character, which means you do not have to call me sir. We are in Season 3, tackling this year's writing challenges and lessons. Today's topic, when to stop outlining. Every writer outlines, or do they? And even if they do, should they? That's what we're getting into on today's Pen Night Radio. Let's dive into why we're here. Let's take our pens and slay the demons that are dragging us down today. Then we write. Pen Night Radio is brought to you by One True Promotion, an alliance of authors and editors dedicated to supporting the indie community. Stephen King once said, "The Notebook is where good ideas go to die." And in my experience, he's right. I think back to a day 10 years ago when I spent 12 hours obsessed with a dream that I had or a thought that came to me while I was listening to something interesting in class. But 10 years later, I couldn't tell you what that idea even was. I'm certain it's somewhere in my notebook, which means that if it is there right now, it did in fact go there to die. King argued that if you're passionate enough about a story to finish that story, you probably don't need to write it down because it'll be persistently nagging at you until you indulge it and make it a real vision. That's how you get your published novels. My experience lines up with his for the most part. And I say that not as a big anti-notes guy who's been all over the internet telling people that they're nerds if they write notes in their notebooks. I say it as a guy who has spent the last 10 years making volumes of notes and outlines. The Children of Arc was a notebook project for 9 years before I produced a rough draft of the novel. So this really isn't about whether King is right or wrong. It's not about whether you should or shouldn't take notes, especially considering that every writer is still an individual and individuals tend to have their own process. As long as it succeeds, then it is a process that is productive. This isn't about all that. This is more about when it's a good idea to take notes and when it's a good idea to stop. So, pens at the ready, knights. We are headed out to battle with this 4-point presentation. I hope you enjoy. From this point on, I will be going off the cuff. So thank you for joining me for another Pen Night Radio. If you are listening on Spotify, please give the podcast a like. If you are watching on YouTube, please follow One True Promotion. If you are watching on Facebook, please share it around and let people know that there's a podcaster who's helping people get over their writing hurdles. I would be eternally grateful. Okay, point number 1. Outlining helps with structure. Now, this is the biggest reason that I still outline. So don't hold me to this, but I planned the Calipar, that is the series title for The Children of Arc. I planned it to be a longer series. And being a longer series, there's a narrative that I have in my mind from start to finish. A series is something I would never go into just making it up as I go. I would be too worried about plot holes, or I would be too worried about something that I said or wrote in book 1 kind of locking me down into that plot point. For example, if you say that your story is about a special rock that gives somebody a special power, a guy picks up a rock and gains the ability to fly. But then multiple books down the road, you want to say that, every person with an ability actually gets it from a biological mutation that came from some kind of aerosol spray that happened as part of the war effort. Well, that might sound like a cool plot point. I know I'm grasping at straws there, but the point is that might sound like a cool plot point. But if you already said that bit about the rock in book 1, you really may be locked down to writing the rest of the series that way. And that was why I never wanted to just write off the cuff if I was doing a longer series. I wanted to really plot out in my mind, where is this going, so that I know where to start. And that's why I think outlining helps with structure. Even having written book 1, I still continue to consult outlines because The Children of Arc, for those of you that read it, isn't just a book about Richard Renovan, a man who is trying to lift a demonic invasion attacking his peaceful town of Arc. It's also about other characters: Luke Motor, Adria Mason, Kevin Marlton, Mayor Alfred Merrick. These are all characters. These are all point of view characters in the Children of Arc. And because it has so many point of view characters, it has a lot of narrative threads. It's a very character driven idea where there are some story arcs in future books where these characters who are interacting in book one don't even talk to each other for, entire story arcs. It goes in that kind of direction. They all kind of go off on their personal journeys, which converge at key points in the narrative. I would never be comfortable embarking on that quest without an outline, because at some point I would just forget where I'm going. I would be like, okay, but where's Luke right now? But where's Richard right now? And wait a minute, I haven't checked in with Adria in a while. Where was she last time? And then to my horror, I might make a mistake. I might have said in my previous chapter that Adria was, swimming in a lake, but I might pick up with her, coming out of a cave in Saudi Arabia or something. I mean, like it's there's just no telling, because I really don't hold on to information in that sustained kind of way. I, being very ADHD, I tend to focus on 5 different things at once, not the least of which is, writing this book, writing that book, writing this lesson plan for work, doing this chore over here. So I was an outliner for many years because it provided me a safety net. I was really able to structure the narrative of the Children of Arc in a way that leads to a lot of the things I want to do in the second and third books, because I had it outlined in a notebook, knowing that that was my destination. Knowing what the destination is helps you to understand where the journey starts. And just writing that down on a piece of paper is one of the best ways to do that. And there's a lot of ways to do that for every individual. You could just write a bulleted list of plot points. But if that's too linear to the point that it gets confusing, you could make it a chart. You know what I mean? Like if we think back to Lord of the Rings, where at some point in the narrative, the characters diverge and Frodo and Sam carry the ring off to all these locations, and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go off to fight these wars in Rohan and Gondor. The narrative completely diverges, and a good way to keep track of that in your own notes is to draw it, to have, a left thread and a right thread, or a left diagonal. I'm using my right hand. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm using my right hand to say left. I don't know what's wrong with me. Having a left diagonal narrative and a right diagonal narrative, and then connecting them at, a critical point in the narrative. You can draw it. You can draw how your story unfolds. Lots and lots of writers, poets, and all kinds of creatives do that. They use these, very scholastic styles in order to take their notes and to make their notes make sense to them when they look at the page, and to just understand the thread. One way that I really love to take notes is I like to make a list of chapters or parts. And if I'm ever doing a storyline that is shared between 2 characters, so, every odd numbered chapter you read this character, and every even numbered chapter you read this character, I like to just, write notes that, just cover what each character is doing, not even so much what's happening in the story, but just what the characters are doing when we check in with them next. And just say, Alec does this, Carrie does that. Alec, goes to the market, Carrie goes to the library, and just keep writing that list of actions to understand what the whole story is. So there's lots of different ways to outline. Even if it looks like a chaotic mess on the page, it can bring your internal thought process so much structure before you go into these stories. So that is a pretty good reason to outline if you want to structure your story and structure it in a way that works best for you as an individual. Point 2, outlining can replace drafting. So I'm flipping the narrative here. After years and years of outlining the Kalapar, I realized that I was getting no closer to finishing book one. And then finishing book one and continuing to outline the rest of the series, I realized that book two was going to be on the same long timetable as book one, and that was significantly hindering progress. So the reason I call this point outlining, replacing, drafting is that, listen, when your vision is formed enough, like Stephen King was saying, when it's left such an impression on you that you could practically spell out the entire chapter in your mind, you start, reciting passages, you have dialogue exchanges going on to the point that you can just say it before you even wrote it down. That really shouldn't go in a notebook. That should just go into your Word document or into your Google Doc or into your Scrivener document. Scrivener, for those of you that don't know, is especially made for writers. But you should be writing your manuscript at that point. If your idea is so formed that you could actually be working on a draft. If you take all those good ideas to your notes instead of to your manuscript, well, the manuscript becomes more about transcribing, and that's not as fun. And, it might not seem as organic or interesting if it's not just what's authentically coming out of your mind and your voice at that time. So outlining at this point can become a drastic waste of time. There's a good way to measure this. I was not bringing my computer to work, but I was able to put a notebook in my bag. And a notebook, a notebook doesn't arouse much, suspicion. It's not something that costs $1,000, so it's not as necessarily valuable. If you, God forbid, left it on a desk because you got busy with something else, it wouldn't be the worst thing that ever happened in the world, whereas losing $1,000 computer is not recommended. So I stopped bringing my computer to work at some point, and I just started bringing notebooks. This was years ago. And I would just jot notes in any free, unstructured moment where I had time to let my thoughts wander. I would just write these pages and pages and pages of handwritten notes. And when I was able to fill up a whole tin, like a moving tin, with notebooks, but my manuscript hadn't been touched in weeks, I realized that there was a transfer of labor that happened there that was completely unproductive. It was a complete waste of time. Nobody is ever going to read these notebooks. They want a book. They want a book to read. And that is what I should have been working on at that time, especially if I was so focused and so in it that I was able to make notes that are, and this is another thing, notes that are so detailed, they basically sound like you're reading a book. Don't put that in a notebook. Put that into the manuscript, because you can go back and edit it later if you're worried about how it sounds or you're worried about inconsistencies. It is so important. If you are like actually scripting out dialogue and describing imagery and striking at a theme with what's happening in the story, put that in the manuscript. Don't put that in a notebook. This is a point where it's probably a great idea to stop outlining. Point 3, outlining can get you into a fixed mindset. So what do I mean by fixed mindset? So to put it simply, in educators' terms, a fixed mindset is basically when you start to believe that you'll always be a certain way. So let's say you're having trouble in math. You're earning a D instead of an A. You study a lot, you work hard, but you're still earning a D. A fixed mindset is when you decide that this is your level of ability. You're never going to be any better at this. So you kind of just stop working at it because you feel very strongly that no matter what you do, you're just never going to be able to overcome that obstacle. And in education, we try to inspire growth mindsets in students. A growth mindset is when you're dedicated to changing, when you believe in your heart and soul that hard work can change your skills and your level of ability. This is defined as a growth mindset. And we encourage growth mindsets in the classroom, obviously. So back to outlining. When you're a storyteller, when you're creative and you have outlined for a long time to the point that outlining becomes, kind of an addiction like it was for me. Like I was way quicker to go to the notebook than I was to just open my manuscript. Outlining can get you into a fixed mindset, and that's a very rough place to be. You can decide that you're so good at scribbling notes, but you just don't set aside the time to write a chapter. So maybe you're not a real author after all. Maybe that's just a pipe dream. Maybe that's something that is, foolish and just not going to happen. It's not you. Yeah, you get some creative ideas every now and then, but everybody's had those ideas already. Just a fixed mindset is when you stop going for the goal. And too much outlining, think of it like running a race, When I was outlining in the first 9 years, just developing the lore and the world of Children of Arc, I really felt like I was on a straight path to the Children of Arc. And then when I drafted the Children of Arc, I felt like I was running a marathon, just like, running at a faster pace, running all day, all night, just completing the race by finally completing that first book in this series that I'd been dreaming about. But then I kept taking notes, and occasionally my notes touched on things from book one, which was already being edited and published. And my notes stopped feeling like a straight line, and it started to feel like my mind was just going in circles, like I was harping on the same things over and over again. And I noticed that I was getting kind of into a fixed mindset. And my fear about a fixed mindset is that if you get so addicted to a process that is not publishable, then you might not see yourself as worthy of publishing. But as we've said on Pen Night Radio and many other shows, you are worthy of publishing. Everybody is. You have an idea in you, and that idea needs to come out. If you are telling any kind of story, but you think, oh, I don't have the skills. Oh, I don't have the time. Oh, I don't have the vision. Vision, time, and skills are all things that can be cultivated through continued labor. You build your skills by continuing trial and error, by trying and failing and trying again. You develop more time by just constantly going back to your schedule, by sacrificing certain things. Stop playing video games, stop binge watching, and start going to your keyboard and typing out ideas. You get a lot of time that way. And the last one I said was, what did I say? I said skills, time, and vision. And vision is something you cultivate as well. A lot of people don't think that. They don't think that unless they have that crazy vision at the beginning of an idea, then they don't really have a book. That's nonsense. I was in high school. I came up with an ending, and I had no idea how to get to that ending, but I kept writing notes and drafting ideas, and I created a whole narrative thread that led to that one scene, which was going to be the ending of a book. I mean, that idea came to me backwards. So vision is something that can be developed as you just continue through a process of developing a world and lore and characters and all that. So basically, everybody needs to have a growth mindset. Everybody needs to know that they can do things they didn't think they could do. And if you do too much outlining, you really can get into a fixed mindset with your art, and that's not good. Point number 4, outlining is fun and helpful even during the writing process. Now, I love Scrivener. Scrivener is the best thing that's ever happened to me. Apart from my marriage, I wrote in Microsoft Word for years. I spent so many years in Microsoft Word because it was familiar to me. I knew it from high school. I understood how to use it. I didn't want to waste any time learning a new software. I just wanted to use what I knew and get back into the stories. And I used Microsoft Word so far past its welcome. In my last semester at Stockton, my professor looked at my personal device because I was pulling up a project to show the class, and he saw that I had opened Microsoft Word, and his eyes went wide, and he just said, why? Because there were so many other options developed by 2014. It was crazy that I was still on Word, but I was on Word all the way to 2021. Sorry, 2019. No, 2021. I was right. 2021, writing the first 2 Calipar manuscripts, many other projects beside that. Calipar became a project that required so much world building that I wanted to look at multiple documents at once, and scrolling through Microsoft Word became murder for me. So I finally went to Scrivener, which is a writing software for writers that is tailor-made to the writer's mind. You've got a Word document in front of you. You've got a binder of files that I'm using it right now for Pen Night Radio. All of your Word documents, your sheets, are developed as scenes, and they're placed into a binder, which you can drag and mix up and rearrange the order of things all you want. And when you click on the binder, it pulls up that document, and right next to it on the same screen is a note section if you want to make some kind of aside. And let me tell you, outlining has actually been very helpful with Scrivener. Sometimes I won't know what I want to do with a scene, so I'll just write it on the notepad right next to the blank document. I will just write a synopsis of what's supposed to happen. What do I think logically happens here? What do these two characters say to each other if they're in the same room with each other for the first time in 10 years? You know, what's the first thing they do? Does somebody grab a gun right away? I mean, I just write all this stuff right there in that notepad. And as I'm reading it, I can start writing the scene on the blank document, like in real time. So with Scrivener, I can outline let me back up. With Scrivener, I can write while I outline. And let me tell you, it is a just fascinating process to be able to use both sides of that creative process at the same time to just write more clearly, with more vision, with more gusto and, determination. I mean, when you have the right technology in front of you, it of course opens up a lot of opportunities that you didn't know were plausible. And this is an area where outlining can actually be very helpful, because sometimes, let's face it, you can stare at that blank page for hours waiting for inspiration. Well, sometimes you don't have to wait for inspiration. Sometimes you can just jot it right down on that second little document on the right side of the screen. And as you're reading it, you can just pick out a sentence and say, okay, how do I say that? How do I put that in dialogue? How do I narrate that? What language do I use to make that sound like a compelling story? And voila, you're off to the races. So that's an area where outlining can actually be very helpful. And that is point number 4. Okay, so in review, usually I do like a 3-point structure for these segments. But if you'll notice, point 1 was that outlining helps. Point 2 was that outlining hurts. Point 3 was that outlining can hurt. And point 4 was that outlining can be fun and very helpful. I did a 4-point structure for this one because I really wanted to just mix it up. There was 2 ways that that outlining was helpful, and 2 ways that it wasn't. What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that you can go either way. You're an individual. You are a pen knight. You are slaying the demons that are holding back you, not the demons that are holding back me, not the demons that are holding back the other artists you know. No, you're here to slay your personal demons, the one that you're struggling with. So your problem might be that outlining is really holding you back. See point 2 and point 3. On the other hand, you might need to do more outlining. So see point 1 and point 4. Really, folks, it's just such a mixed bag. I mean, I can definitely say that oddly enough, all 4 of these points are from my personal story. Point 1, 2, 3, and 4 were very true for me. Outlining did help me with structure. Outlining was fun and is very helpful when I don't know how to start a scene or how to follow it through to its end. But it's also true that outlining did replace drafting and waste a lot of my time. It's true that I risked getting into a fixed mindset when I was just taking notes instead of getting back into the books. So I hope that this gave you some clarity on how it can be helpful, how it can be hurtful, and whether or not you should be continuing or stopping. All right, well, that was Pen Night coming at you for the first segment of Pen Night Radio today, and we will be back with a second in just a moment. Stay tuned for more Pen Night Radio.
this time my pocket. Give it to you later on in the form of a locket.
And we are back. Thank you very much for your patience. That was a longer delay than usual, but I hope it gave you a chance to grab a tea or a coffee. Okay, so this is a new segment of Pen Night Radio that I'm really excited to talk to you about. So give me just a second to pull up a piece of very helpful information here. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, well, you know what? We will dive right into it. Okay, so this new segment of Pen Night Radio is called Books in the News. Now, a little word on One True Promotion. Andrew Bast is our marketing expert at One True Promotion. He is one of my best friends. We went to high school together. The day we met, we were just talking about the stories that were in our notebooks. I was outlining and he was actually writing a book. So hats off to Andrew there for being the first person to inspire me to do a little bit less outlining, although it took me 15 years to start realizing it. But we've always had a bond over the stories that we write. And Andrew does all of our marketing at One True Promotion. He's become an absolute genius at it. He's actually a freelance literary agent. And when I told Andrew that I am seeking traditional publishing deals, he knew exactly what to send me right away. And he actually sent me a link to join this thing called publishersmarketplace.com. Now, publishersmarketplace.com, if you don't know, let me just make sure I don't give any false information here. Publishers Marketplace is an industry news website that can help authors connect with agents and editors. So, of course, ask and thou shalt receive. Andrew hooked me up with exactly what I needed. Now, I've been a member of Publishers Marketplace for a couple months now, and it's very exciting to just be plugged into the industry and just know what's happening with other authors. I knew what was happening with my contacts in the indie community for the longest time, and that's been true for the past several years. But I've gone a step further, and I now know what's happening in the industry with agents, editors, publishing houses, and books that are in the news right now. And that's what this new segment is called, Books in the News. I'm going to share with you some industry facts and information that you might really enjoy. So, what books are in the news today? We've got Coming Home by Brittany Griner and Michelle Burford. We've got God Spare the Girls by Kelsey McKinney. We've got Exhibit by R.O. Kwan. We've got Helen Vendler book, The Art of Shakespeare's Sonnets by Helen Vendler. I read that completely wrong. Do forgive me there. But those books have been in the news since May 6th, which I believe was Monday. So I want to give you a quick look into what they are. So, of course, Brittany Griner is the basketball star who was held in a Russian prison for an unacceptable amount of time and is thankfully home. Her book is called Coming Home. That is currently in the news. And if you are interested in diving more into her story and her experience, then you should definitely be aware that book is coming out. Kelsey McKinney, host of the hit podcast Normal Gossip, says right here, juicy new book on the way. In an exclusive first look with Elle.com, McKinney shares the story behind her long-kept secret, a book called You Didn't Hear This From Me. This is very interesting, actually. I didn't see this one. It has to do with the best secret she's ever kept. Just between us, she wrote in bold black letters, entrusting her audience to do the rest. McKinney, after all, knows the power of a good piece of gossip. I'm sure that some of you listening right now, even if you're against it in practice, might find it a little hard to resist good gossip. So that definitely might be right up your alley if that is the case. Okay, 17. Oh my goodness, 17 new books coming in May. This is why I love Publishers Marketplace. I love it because I click on a link and I find out information about 17 new books that are coming in May. And this has been, just an info blast, a daily info blast that me as an indie published author just plugged into the indie community didn't quite have until recently. So new novels from R.O. Kwan, Kevin Kwan, and Miranda. July, a reappraisal of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, memoirs from Brittany Griner and Kathleen Hanna, and more. This is more of a review of everything that's coming out. But I'm just going to give you a quick sample of what's on this list. We've got some new cookbooks coming out. We've got a book called Free and Equal, a manifesto for a just society by Daniel Chandler. That looks pretty interesting. Shanghailanders by Julie Min, wholly captivating, extraordinary, breathtakingly smart and glorious. A complicated family story told in reverse, a 2040 family simmering with secrets and tensions. And then the story works its way backward to 2014, revealing how each person got to where they are. And that sounds pretty good too. Whale Fall by Elizabeth O'Connor, 1938, 18-year-old Manad, hope I'm pronouncing that right, has never known a life outside the harsh, sparsely populated confines of her remote and rocky home off the coast of Wales until a pair of self-styled English ethnographers arrived to both document and disrupt the island's residents. So I'm looking through this list, and now you're probably wondering, why am I just listing off books in this segment? I'm going through this list, and I'm trying to discover, a common theme between the books that are making the news today. One of the questions that I always asked myself when I was considering trying to find agents and trying to find traditional publishers, which I started out doing, by the way. I didn't start out looking for indie. I actually started with a company called Seven Horns. That is a story for another day. But ever since I started looking for publishing deals, I always wondered, how do I know if my books can be pleasing to people? How do I crowdsource? How do I gather information? Believe me, I've put questions up on Facebook. What are you reading? What are you interested in? But when you just ask, like, maybe the couple hundred people on your Facebook or the 1,000 people on your Instagram, first of all, it's hard to get an answer there these days because social media ads have changed everything. There's so many ads now that most of the people you were used to keeping up with all these years, they don't even know when you post anymore. Every other day, it seems like I'm having another person I know tell me, where you been? I'm like, I've been here. I've been posting. I've been having an episode coming out every week. And they just don't see it because of all these ads and how the algorithm favors the ad content, including the ad content that you put out. I can put out an ad for Penn Night Radio, and the ad will do very well, but the episode might not do very well because people might not know when it is. I mean, it's just crazy. It's very hard to get information on social media. So I really enjoy the update from Publishers Marketplace because it's my newspaper into the publishing world. Now, the books that I just read off to you, they seem to be dealing a lot with culture. They seem to be dealing with contemporary issues of culture and geography and family dynamics. People are still reading cookbooks. People are still into celebrity gossip. It seems like if you have a powerhouse name and secrets that you never told anybody, that's still doing very well. Brittany Griner's book, I expect, is going to do very well because so many people followed her story and so many people were overjoyed when she came home. And I'm sure that they are hungry to learn more about what that was like for her. So these are the books that are doing well on Monday. There was a whole another list published for Tuesday, but I'm not going to bore you with that because I already read off this huge list to you. But so if you're out there right now with a book, your book could be fantasy, your book could be romance, your book could be, mockumentary, your book could be satire, it could be social commentary, or maybe it's just you're not sure what genre it fits into. What books that are doing very well right now. They have to do with current world affairs. They have to do with questions of culture and questions of family dynamics. Let's say you're working on your pitch for your book, like I had to work on my pitch for Children of Arc. Well, my book's a fantasy, and there's a lot about it that's new and risky, but at its core, it's got family values. And you could even read half a page that expresses family values or how they fit into the plot. Well, my book is very new and very risky. It doesn't, people aren't going to quite get what a blah, 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 blah is if you invented a new creature or something. I don't know how quite to explain it, but I can tell you that the whole thing is a metaphor for being queer in a queer, unfriendly world. That is something that is currently doing very well. And if you can figure out what about your book is comparable to today's trends, then you might have an easier time finding the right agent than you might think you do. Okay, so that is the books that are in the news today. This is a new segment of Pen Night Radio, and I hope it left you encouraged to go out and get some more information, figure out who you should contact, and to just keep working with your books and your pitches until you get it right. All right, so we are going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we are going to close up the show. Stay tuned. And we are back. Okay, we're not going to draw this out much longer. This will be a short episode today, especially since we didn't have an interview. I do want to say a word on Mr. Quentin Green. He is currently running a fundraiser. You saw him on Monday night if you watched my live. He's running a fundraiser for his daughter's, I'm pretty sure it's his daughter's niece. Quentin, please forgive me if I got that wrong, but Emmanuel, little sister, thank you. My wife is here. Emanuela. It was Moranzi's little sister, Emanuela. They live in Africa, and Emanuela is trying to get into boarding school. They're trying to get her into boarding school, and they need some funds to get that done. Folks, not only is Quentin a great friend who does amazing art and does a lot of work to prop up and give exposure to artists living in the South Jersey tri-state area, but he's also doing what I think is one of the best things a person can do right now. Folks, education is suffering. Graduation rates are not doing so hot here in America. Achievement rate is not doing so well. In general, people's engagement with a lesson is extremely low. And a lot of students, the vast majority of students, I would argue, have a fixed mindset. So even if you are seeing graduation rates, it's probable that, they're getting a little bit of help at the end of the marking period to get a C or a B or an A or even a D that gets them to graduation. And they're going all the way to 12th grade in pretty much survival mode. And if you ask somebody, you're planning on going to college, or you're planning on doing this kind of work or that kind of work, nobody really has an answer for you. I saw that even amongst older kids as they were, headed into their final years. On some level, that's always been normal. There's always a lot of pressure when you're young to figure out what you want to do. And you don't know. You don't know until you get to a certain age. And I understand that. But there is an increased sense of apathy amongst young people, especially. I'm talking like, middle schoolers when it comes to their lessons. And how does any of this connect to Pen Night Radio? Well, how it connects to Pen Night Radio is that people aren't reading anymore. People see reading as like raking the leaves in your yard, and in fact, some people would prefer that because at least that is something that doesn't make you feel overwhelmed to the point that you might feel, unintelligent. When you get into a fixed mindset and you're having trouble puzzling out the words on the page, you can start to truly believe that it's just beyond you. It's beyond your level of capability. And that fixed mindset keeps you there. And kids are really struggling with that today. And schools just aren't doing well in general. There's all these financial struggles going on. There's these battles for what funding should be, sunk into. So anyway, I think Quentin is doing a great thing, making sure this little girl has a shot at education, because this is somebody who wants an education. This is a young person from Africa who recognizes the value of an education in fulfilling longer term goals in life. And I mean, just try explaining that to somebody who you're desperately trying to help on a regular basis if they've gotten into that fixed mindset, despite the fact that they're already there, already able to learn. You just can't break through that negative mindset. And honestly, we're here promoting on social media, but social media is one of the biggest problems here. It perpetuates, it programs the minds of people to pursue things that are really not educational in any sense. So we're really I fear for the next generations and their educations and how that might affect their ambitions. I'm not saying I don't think they're going to get jobs. I'm not saying I don't think that they're going to figure out how to survive. Everybody figures out how to survive. But I'm worried for you if you're not slaying those demons. I'm worried for their ambitions. I'm worried for how far they're going to push themselves. And I would just love it if one little girl who really is doing her best could, secure some funding so that her education could be paid for and she can just start making her dreams come true. So Quentin is going to be on next Saturday. He wasn't able to come today. We had a bit of a scheduling issue. It was all my fault. What am I talking about? So he will be joining us next Saturday to plug that fundraiser. A quick word on fundraisers. If you want to use your book to do some good in the world, you can auction off free copies for a fundraiser. You could select a charity that's meaningful to you, the Human Rights Campaign, the Wounded Warrior Project, Action Against Hunger. Those are just 3 examples off the top of my head. And you can just go live and start reading your favorite segments of your book and making sure that you that all that airtime goes toward that charity. I mean, there's a lot that artists can do to make sure that they're doing good for other people. And you could also write a book. You could write a concept that aligns with the mission statement of a certain charity. And when people engage with the words in your story, they can come to identify or understand that charity's purpose and perhaps, take action in real life. So there's a whole lot of good we can do right here on Penn Night Radio. And I really hope that when Quentin comes on next week, you guys will help me give him a warm welcome and maybe consider donating to the fund. So that's the show tonight. I really appreciate you being here. And hit that button by mistake. I really appreciate you being here. Penn Night Radio is dedicated to bringing you quality content that is both educational and inspiring. We will be back next week with our next topic and our next guest. Until then, Knights, thank you for being here, and right on.